さんのご質問いただきまして本当にどうもありがとうございました。本日はトムとまた我々のスタッフの方でですね、事前にピックアップをさせていただいております質問の方をいくつかご紹介させていただきまして、このセッションを使いまして回答させていただきます。またいただいた質問の中で、パワーポイントに記載する際に若干の、表現をですね、分かりやすいように変更させていただいておりますので、そちらの方はご了承のほどぜひよろしくお願いいたします。それではセッションの方を始めさせていただきたいと思います。ではよろしくお願いします。
Okay, so some questions have been submitted, received them, and went through and came up with some answers. So the first question was about the benefits upgrading to 11G Release 2 from the point of view of end users. For most of the end users, the things they'll see will be side effects of you using new capabilities. So for example, we just talked about edition-based redefinition. You're in 11G Release 2, you need to make a fix to your application. In the past, your end users would be very aware that you were making this patch because you would be telling them, we're going to shut down from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock on this day to apply the patch. With 11G Release 2, the benefit they would see is they would not see that message. You wouldn't have to shut down from 11 to 12 in order to apply that patch. You would just apply the patch while they're still running the application, test it while they're still running the old application, and then simply cut over to the new version. So they would see, for example, reduced downtime. They could also see other benefits from other large features, such as Data Guard, for example, our standby database. We can transparently offload queries to the standby database now. Read-only queries from your application, your select statements, instead of going against the live production data where all of the transactions are happening. We can redirect those to the standby database. It's a copy of your production instance. It's lagging behind. It's falling behind your production database by only a few seconds. So in many cases, we can utilize that data just as well as the production data. So they'll see other things like improved performance. One of the things that they'll not see would be SQL statements that used to run fast, running slower, because of things like SQL plan management that make upgrading much, much safer than it was in the past. So from the end user perspective, an 11G Release 2 upgrade should mean increased availability, performance that's at least as good as it used to be, if not significantly better, due to major new functionality. Another question was pointing out that I am one of two authors of the current Oracle Concepts Manual. The Release 2 version was redone from the 11G Release 1 and 10G and 9i versions. And the question was, what was the hard part in writing the concepts guide? Where we spent the most time on the rewrite of the concepts guide was on the table of contents, the outline. If you go back to, say, version 9i or 10G or 8i, and you look at the table of contents for the concepts guide, you would see a lot of architecture concept stuff in there, but you would also see a lot of feature stuff. Things that were not concepts, but they got added to the documentation over time, making it confusing, making it not applicable for everyone, making it not a good, this is the first document you should read when learning Oracle. So our challenge was to take what had grown from a concepts manual into a features manual and turn it back into concepts. And that's what we did. We were very brutal, if you will, in ripping out chapters. So a lot of text fell by the wayside. It's smaller. It's a little over 400 pages rather than over 500 to over 700 pages. So it's a smaller document. Yet it's a larger document because it's covering less stuff but with more words. So it's going a little bit more in depth. We made the explanations more clear. I got rid of a lot of myths that had cropped up in the documentation. What I don't like is when I go give a presentation and I say, never, never do this. And somebody says, but I'm reading in the Oracle documentation and it says we should do this. There were a lot of those in the concepts guide. I'm pretty sure that most of them are gone. So it's a technically accurate document that explains the concepts of Oracle. And for any new hire, it should be the first thing you give them. On the first day at work, Oracle developer, new DBA, have them read the concepts guide, and we'll get a good overview of how the database works. This question was a hard one to answer because it's saying, I have standard edition. Standard edition doesn't have a lot of built-in automation. It's very manual. So I do things like read stats pack reports. I check the top 5 events. I look at cache hit ratios. I look at the advisors. Is this the right approach? Well, it is the right approach. It is, in fact, an approach that we've automated in Enterprise Edition with Enterprise Manager. So tuning in diagnostic packs, they look at all this information, and they decide how to fix the database based on that. That should set up what I call a red flag for some people. If you're tuning a database using this information, you're doing the same exact thing that a piece of software is capable of doing. And historically, if a piece of software can do what you do, eventually you will be replaced by that piece of software, right? Because there are rules that we can apply to this data to figure out what to do. So if you're sitting there reading the PGA aggregate target advisor in the stats pack report, and it says, instead of 256, you should set this to 512. You're not adding a lot of value. You're just changing a parameter, but it's making all the decisions. So what I would encourage the person who's in this case, from a tuning perspective, is encourage wherever you're at to use the software to do this. This is beneath human beings anymore. This can be automated. What we need to do is look at the application, how it is architected, take it up a level. The database is not going to be able to look at our application. Remember that piece of code that I showed you? The database is never going to be able to take this stored procedure and figure out that it should be one SQL statement. We can, but it's going to be many, many releases before a database can actually reverse engineer a stored procedure, figure out what it's doing, and make it more efficient. If you really want to tune, you're going to go back to the application and take a look at what it does, and you're going to let the database tune the individual SQL statements. Because the database will identify all of the expensive SQL, and the database can tune that expensive SQL. It will suggest indexes. It will suggest ways to rewrite it, materialized views, SQL profiles. It does all that. We don't need to anymore. So I would encourage you to look at Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition, if you're constantly doing this. And if you're consolidating lots of databases, then it really makes sense to look at Enterprise.